Hey, what's the deal? It's your boy Tag from Pro Wrestling Tag. You know what I mean? As of this recording right now, it is 3:49 p.m., June 26, 2025. You know what I mean? And right now, this is the second video I'm doing for the day. You know what I mean? It's boring as shit. I'm just here chilling because, you know, I need time to rest and shit. You know what I mean? So a couple of days ago, I made a video about how, you know, there is no such thing as a perfect pro wrestling promotion, right? And I forgot to mention in that one, I forgot to mention Ring of Honor, right? Ring of Honor, you know, like all wrestling promotions have their flaws. And Ring of Honor's flaws were basically, you know, Ring of Honor was, you know, the super indie, but, you know, the production was okay. But it was like a lot of dark. It was like a lot of dark and gritty stuff within not only the production, but also with how the aesthetics look and such, right? You know, and of course they didn't have a video game deal and such. But to me, they were up there. They were up there with, you know, with the top tier promotions that you see, right? And yeah, that's a promotion I forgot to mention. But speaking of promotions, right? One promotion that I had mentioned in that video was about the American Wrestling Association. Hold on, let me drink some water. And, you know, this would be a topic I would talk about on Sundays, but fuck it. You know, I don't got nothing to do. You know, I might play some video games after this. Who knows? You know, but I want to make this video about the American Wrestling Association because I kind of felt like that was a promotion that, you know, what could have happened to the American Wrestling Association had it survived through the 90's, right? Had it survived through the 90's. And we all know why the American Wrestling Association, you know, failed. We all know why it went under, right? We all know why, right? And a lot of it had to do with Verne Gagne, right? Verne Gagne, you know, being so out of touch with, you know, with the product that, you know, a lot of people were leaving. A lot of people left. A lot. You know what I mean? A whole lot of people left. All their big stars wound up leaving. You know, they wound up leaving, going to the World Wrestling Federation and such. And even Hulk Hogan and such. But it could have survived. To me, it could have survived. It could have survived had, you know, had they done a few things. Right? Now, would they have been, you know, could they have been, you know, a top tier promotion like, you know, the World Wrestling Federation and WCW? Yes. Believe it or not, yes. Yes, it could have. Yes, it could have. Yes, it could have. Right? I mean, what we see in 1991 with the tag series, that was not the way to go at it. It really was not. You know what I mean? It clearly was not because, you know, the way how they just went about the tag series, it was like, fuck that. You know what I mean? What I did was I actually asked ChatGPT, what do they think? And I'm going to actually mention what they said. And I know Greg Gagne was also another person who was part of the AWA. But I think, and again, this is just my opinions. You know what I mean? These are clearly my opinions about, you know, what I think could have happened with the AWA, right? Because I think the AWA honestly could have done something big. You know what I mean? Or it could have been. So do I think let me take back what I said about how it could have been big, like, you know, WWE and WCW. I think they probably would have been in between with like how ECW was and the World Wrestling Federation. You know what I mean? That's what I think would have happened, right? So this is all going by what ChatGPT thinks, and I actually agree with what ChatGPT has to say, right? So number one, branding and presentation. You know, modernization of look. Basically, they had to revamp stuff. You know what I mean? Like, at the time, in the 90s, and we're talking about like the mid, the early to mid 90s, right? Yeah, it was still cartoonish and everything. You know what I mean? But what they could have done was they could have took, they could have, rebranded the logo, right? To make it look a little bit more, modernized to the 90s, right? You could have done that easily, right? And they could have took a mixture of, and that's just me, a mixture of what WWE, what the World Wrestling Federation, what World Championship Wrestling was doing. You could have took a mixture of both and just added on into, into the AWA. You know what I mean? Not only with the logos, you know what I mean, but with the style, the style of the TV production, you know what I mean? The ring. See, the ring, all right, I didn't have a problem with the ring. You know what I mean? They could have cleaned up the ring and such. They could have, maybe changed the colors and such of the ring. You could have still kept the red, blue, and red stuff on it. You could have still done that. You know what I mean? Like, they definitely could have done that. Shit, you could have put white in there. You know what I mean? Like, you could have done that. You know what I mean? You clearly could have done that, right? They could have easily had done that. In terms of like television, they could have bumped up their television production. You know what I mean? Like, you could have easily had, hired, former WWF people and WCW people, to bump up the television productions. You know what I mean? You could have easily done that, right? But also remember, they was working with ESPN. You know what I mean? So they could have easily took some stuff from ESPN, and added onto their their arsenal, right? So we're talking about branding. Now the talent roster, there was a lot of people coming from Minnesota. Minnesota at one point was a gold mine, and I got a video on the Minnesota wrestling scene. There was a lot of people that that came from the Minnesota area and the Michigan area and also the Midwest. You know what I mean? Also the Midwest. And, who was just fucking popular. I mean, shit. You had X-Pac, Jerry Lynn, Scott Norton, RVD, Sabu. You know what I'm saying? Fucking Chris Jericho, Lance Storm, who worked that style. Shit. I would have even done a work relationship with the United States Wrestling Association. Get it? The AWA, the United States Wrestling Association, I could have done that. You know what I mean? And then let's say if me personally, I still think they would have went under probably around 2001-ish. Shit. Imagine CM Punk working there, right? If they would have survived, right? Imagine that. But then again, you never know, right? Let me see. Who else you had? Like, you had people there. Scott Hall could have wrestled there. Again, like, that area was a core for talent, right? And like I also said too, the wrestling style had to change, right? They could have went more towards, and again, this is my opinion, they could have went more towards a WCW type of style where it was just pure wrestling. And shit, if you would have went a little bit more further and go to like, the Japan style of things, they could have done that too. Shit, they could have fucking done that. They could have easily done that. You know what I mean? To survive. Booking philosophy. Like I said, they could have done stuff like WCW and the WWF combined together. You know what I mean? Like, you could have easily done that to make your product kind of look similar to what they were doing, but very, very different. You know what I mean? Like, you could have presented like, more of what WCW was doing with the WWF aesthetics. You know what I mean? They also would have had to come up with someone who would have been a franchise player for them. You know what I mean? They could have easily done that, right? The other one here, business model and partnerships. It says the NWA. That would have been perfect for the AWA, especially once the NWA departed from WCW. You know what I mean? The AWA it would have been right there. It would have been right fucking there. You know what I mean? You could have easily done something with the NWA. That way, see, the AWA would have survived. Let me go back to the production, right? They could have signed a TV deal. You know what I mean? It could have been ESPN, possibly, or you could have done like what, the Sports Channel, WGN. You know what I mean? You could have you could have gone syndication. You could have gone to a syndicated route. You could have easily done that. They could have done that. Clearly, they could have done that. You know what I mean? Everything was there for the AWA to survive, but they fucked up. It also says something about an ECW work relationship. I could have seen that too. I could have definitely seen that as well with the AWA, the American Wrestling Association, and ECW. I could have seen that. I could have seen that. You mix the styles up together. It would have been perfect. Along with the NWA, maybe not the NWA. Maybe they would have done stuff with the NWA and then eventually hop out the NWA. You know what I mean? But that would have worked for a while. You know what I mean? And then I would have seen them with a relationship with ECW. Also, let me go a little bit more further. It says championships. Definitely a world heavyweight champion. Scott Norton would have been your man. Clearly. Because that dude, an arm wrestler, to a pro wrestler, he would have been fucking amazing. Clearly amazing. Again, this is just me shooting the shit. You know what I mean? This is just me shooting the shit. Stuff that you seen like in the American Wrestling Federation, you could have added it there. It was so much shit. So much shit. Let me see. They definitely would have had a video game deal. Oh, if you had a TV deal, you definitely would have had a video game deal. Clearly. The American Wrestling Association would have worked. And also, let's go a little bit more further. Let's say this was the, mid to late 90s, right? They clearly would have to adapt it with the times, especially what the fuck ECW was doing. It could have been a mixture of what ECW and the WWF was doing at that time, right? Almost the Attitude Era, but not necessarily, right? And again, the AWA, it still had life. It still had life. Like they could have took those characters from the AWA, especially like in the tag series, and brought realism out of them. You could have. The AWA could have worked. They could have fucking worked. They could have worked. All they had to do was get the fuck out of that out of touch mindset and such. Maybe bring somebody else in, right? Shit, they could have brought in someone with fresh ideas and such. Shit, Paul Heyman could have been perfect for the AWA. He would have been perfect. He would have been fucking perfect. You know what I mean? See what ECW was doing. Take from there and mix it up. You could have done that. You could have easily have fucking done that. But no, look what happened to the AWA. You know what I mean? The AWA was basically a lost cause. Does it still bother me that the AWA died? Yes. Out of all the promotions, that thing could have had some life. The AWA definitely could have had some life, especially in the 90s with what we fucking see. With what the fuck we see. You know what I mean? Going from, the Golden Age era to the New Generation era to the fucking Attitude era. The NWO. You know what I mean? Shit. If I go a little bit more further, right? Let's say if they didn't have a work relationship with ECW, right? The AWA could have done something with WCW. Ding. There you go. They could have done something right there. Shit, you could have put them on fucking TBS. You could have put these motherfuckers on TBS. You know what I mean? Or shit, you could have put them on fucking syndication television. Maybe ESPN. You know what I mean? The AWA had something there, but they fucked up. And it bothers me. It bothers the fuck out of me. Because the AWA, like I said, was a big promotion during that time. And they just floundered. And I know I'm almost going 15 minutes, but yo, it bothers me. It still bothers me to this day. Because they had something there. They could have been, a third or fourth brand, and they blew it. They fucking blew it. Fuck Vern Gagne, fuck Greg Gagne, and fuck everyone there too, who was in that circle. I'm about to be out. I'm coming with another video tonight, so I'm going to holler at y'all later. All right? Peace.